Hello. I have tried so hard to be able to come to Cedar Song to share a talk, and I just keep looking at my schedule. My schedule is just not cooperating with me. So I am recording this video and I'm sending it to Cedar Song with the hopes that they can use it somehow in their programming. I just want to first say that I'm very grateful to Cedar Song. They have provided such an integral, important part of my curriculum at the Living Water School. I discovered Cedar Song at the beginning of the virus, and because of Cedar Song, I really want to say that it saved our school. It helped us to survive because we made outdoor learning a part of our schooling while we tried to survive the pandemic, and it kept us together, and it just brought about a whole new way of thinking about and doing schooling. And even though the virus is over now, we're back in the building, we are still practicing nature study, inspired by the work of Aaron Kinney and Cedar Song. And one of the biggest things that I have been challenged to do is to show why nature study is so connected, relevant to the Black community. So I usually take my students away twice a year to study for an in-depth, more intensive time studying nature for an entire weekend. We do it twice a year, once in the winter, once in the spring. So they can compare seasons and we go to the same place each time so they can just notice these changes in the seasons and the climate and in nature. And I spend a lot of time, first of all, because they're predominantly African American, showing them first that this is a part of our heritage. And that's what this video is going to be about, is just a little talk on how I'm able to show Black students why studying in nature, being in a forest school, is a part of their heritage. You know, my family and I are heavy campers. We camp in tents and so on and so forth. And a lot of times we're the only African American family in the campgrounds. And I've often been told by people, oh, that's for white people. That's what white people do. But I have had a lot of time to think about this nature study and the history of it in the Black community. And I hope you can appreciate what I'm going to share with you. Nature study is a part of Black history. Our ancestors studied nature. It was how we survived. There are stories of the enslaved people knowing exactly what herbs to choose to bring healing because they could not get any medical support for any of their ailments. But they learned how to use nature to bring healing, to make balms for rashes and scars, to make medicine that could heal an illness. We learned that. Even now, I am the great great granddaughter of enslaved people. And my grandmother was always telling me, here, try this aloe vera. Here, try this plant on that. Here, drink some chamomile tea. And so all of that is a part of us. Even our use of essential oils and all of that was something that was very unique to the Black community because we did not have the resources in America to help heal our ailments. So we learned how to use nature to do that. And the only way to do that was to study nature. Another way that we connect with nature study is nature study helped us escape from slavery. Yes. There's a song called Follow the Drinking Gourd, and it's sprinkled with nature study. And I'm going to sing bits of it and then explain to you how the slaves used this song that talked about various points in nature to help them know how to escape. When the sun comes back and the first quail calls, follow the drinking gourd. Now, this is the thing. When the sun comes back and the first quail calls, does anyone know what that means? It means springtime. Basically, it's saying run when it's springtime. Then it says follow the drinking gourd. It means follow the Big and Little Dipper because with those you can discover the North Star. So here we have Black people who were enslaved had never had any formal education in climate, in seasons, in astronomy. and created this song to help them discover a map to get to freedom. Follow the North Star to get freedom. For the old man's a waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gold. Then the other part of the song says, the river ends between two hills. Follow the drinking gold. Now they had to study nature. They had to know where riverbanks were. The riverbank was really important because most enslaved people would run to the river because if they could get to the river, wade in the water, then it would stop the smell of the hunting dogs from catching them. Oh, I get goosebumps. They were studying nature. Nature studies saved so many black lives. It rescued, it liberated so many black lives. And I try to tell my students, this is our history. For the old man's a waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gold. And there's another river on the other side. Follow the drinking gold. When the great big river meets the little river, follow the drinking gold. So on this map, there were these two rivers that would connect, and you knew that you were headed north to freedom. So that whole song, Follow the Drinking Gourd, is based on my ancestors' history, studying nature as a way to escape to freedom. And so there were other parts. There were parts of knowing which way the sun was shining by the way the mushrooms grow on the tree trunk or the moss grows on a tree trunk. There were ways that because oftentimes we weren't fed, we learned how to study which plants would be for our nourishment. So a lot of black cuisine comes out of our nature study, knowing what is growing in the wild to cook and make for our own nourishment because oftentimes we would not be fed. Well, when slavery ended, nature study continued. Many early black schools required their students to continue this tradition of studying nature, and nature study was a part of early black schools. So I felt really connected to my ancestors when I met Cedar Song, and I made nature study a part of our curriculum like my ancestors did. And one of the ones who came out of these schools would be George Washington Carver. He was a naturalist. He is the one who discovered all the many ways to use the peanut and the soybean. And if you read his biography and autobiography and his articles, he talks about how he would just go and spend hours, starting at sometimes 4 a.m. in the morning, studying nature. And through just observing, listening, touching, feeling nature, George Washington Carver taught us so many things about how to plant, how to fertilize soil, how to use different plant life for our nourishment. And he was an enslaved child, and he grew up to be a professor and a scientist. And a lot of the discoveries we have from nature have come from his research. So nature study is a part of Black history. Now, some may wonder, how did we know this? How did we know to depend on nature for our own health, well-being, liberation? Because the African people came with nature study skills, and they passed that on from generation to generation. There's even a story of a group of enslaved people that lived on the Carolina coasts. So that would be Hilton Head and some of those islands just off the coast of North and South Carolina, even into Georgia. And typically, when enslaved people were taken from Africa, they would separate them from anyone from their tribe so they couldn't have any connection with their roots. But the slave masters along the Carolina coasts were looking for a very specific group of people from West Africa who knew exactly how to grow crops in a certain type of tropical weather. And so they took these enslaved people from this one spot. They are sometimes called the Gullah Geechee people, and they came from the parts of West and Central Africa that were known for growing rice, indigo, and other plant life that thrives in certain tropical temperatures. And so, because of this, these plantation owners wanted this certain group of African people to be able to do a good job with running their plantations, growing their crops. And so the Gullah Geechee have a very strong cultural impact on the Carolina coast. They're one of the few spaces where you get a strong cultural impact because they were able to preserve a lot of their culture there. But again, this connects to the knowledge we have before we even came into America. America didn't give us this gift of nature study. It was something that my ancestors did while we were in Africa, and we brought it over to America. And so as a result, this gift of studying nature for our own well-being is a tradition passed on from generation to generation, all the way up to my grandmother, all the way up to my mother, and all the way up to me. So nature study, the work of Cedar Song, connects so much to my heart, so much to my heritage. And I am so excited to be able to share this with students where we just go out without any interference or me telling them what to do, and they freely observe what's going on in the nature around them. Whether they're chasing a butterfly, seeing seagulls fly over water because we're located near the water, noticing the plant life. One day, our dream is to own our own land, our own property, where we can really plant our own gardens and just really study nature in a more immersive way. But for the time being, we've just moved to Old Town Alexandria, just outside of DC, where there's lots of parks along the Potomac River all around us. We go away for 2 weekends during the school year to study nature along the Chesapeake Bay, and we're continuing to live out this vision that Aaron Kinney had, that I felt was for my people, for my students, for me. And so I'm excited to share this video with you guys, and I hope this little bit of information about how nature study connects to African American people is a blessing to you. One more person I like to tell my students about is the story of Benjamin Banneker. He also was an avid naturalist, and he even created a farmer's almanac. And this again came from him observing nature, studying the stars, studying the nature that surrounded him. And he is actually the one who was instrumental in helping design the layout of Washington, D.C. So here we are in Washington, D.C. The subway station is just at the corner by our school. We are in the city. But I can tell my students that this city that we often do our field trips in as we walk around in the DC area was designed by a Black man who studied nature. And he used that to help serve America. Nature study belongs to all of us. And I bet if we all look back in our history, we would find how important nature study is to all of our heritage.